So there was maybe a paradox that I found when I was listening to you two. You're saying whatever works, and you were in fact occupying the spaces that were free of their past in use and of their past function with something new. And you were asking, and at least some of the offices proposed also that architecture should search, and you were also particularly stating at the end, for a new form of the public space. So how would you comment on this? How much is in fact, is a forum an important part, or is it important for the public space, or vice versa? Does public space need any kind of, does it still need any kind of forum?
Well, it's, as I said at the beginning, I really think, I don't know whether you share my opinion, but I think if we look at the history of public space, it's almost impossible to typecast public space in terms of its performativity, shape, form, politics of use. In that sense, I think that public space is some kind of a medium that is, I mean, basically public space, it's impossible to understand public space with the present day tools of architecture. I mean, this is the very reason why we architects don't understand public space, because we think about, I don't know, what the pavement form or whatever, you know. I mean, this is very general answer, but to come to the question that was raised earlier before, you know, what does it, in my sense of, I mean, I do agree with Ethel that, you know, public space is the space for everybody, and I do agree with Anna that public space is the space of antagonism. But when I think about it, I think in terms of public space and in the context of what I shown before, and maybe also in the context of what was shown by the colleague from Amsterdam, I think that public space, the closest definition of contemporary public space is the absence. You know, absence of political power, absence of architectural power, absence of form, absence of, you know, I mean, I think why I was all these years trying to find these empty, abandoned spaces, and probably why, I mean, it's, I don't see him here, but I would like to ask a colleague from Amsterdam, why was he so eager to, or you know, what was the drive to seek for these little alleys? You know, I think we are looking for the absence. You know, we are looking for the spaces of freedom that are absent of all these sorts of power, and form is one sort of power, definitely. So I think that today, in the situation where we are most probably experiences the city that is in the process of decay, you know, of disappearance, of shifting, of dismantling, of mutating. I think that, I don't know, through my practice, I never posed this question on top, you know, what is the form of public space, in a sense, you know. I think it comes as a non-intended outcome, which was never put as a variable at the beginning, you know. It's not something that was drawn on the napkin, you know, and it was something that was the platform for the next steps. This is what, from my practice.
Well, I would like to actually go back to one thing you said, which I thought it was interesting. You said that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said we should not look for utopias anymore because they have been realized. Something like this.
Yeah, it's kind of postmodern combination between postmodern cynicism and the critique of contemporary architecture. But
yeah, I'm not going to interpret it.
But I think
literally,
you got it right.
Yeah. It's just because I think in the context of this discussion, I think there was one part of these utopias that was not realized, which was the social part or
the main part.
The main part, exactly. So of course, when you say today that you draw back to sort of to reject the formal power, and that you're working on this social or the main part, you are still promoting. You're trying to realize some sort of utopia, right? So you're acknowledging that because in a way, my interest in our project and maybe those statements have to do mostly with, if you look at architecture outside of this particular environment that we are discussing here today. I don't know how I can divide a normal practice that is not focused on these concerns. That architecture is not looking for realizing any particular utopia. No? So in that sense, they're having a very different response to this exhaustion of 50s and 60s utopias. What we tried to do was, in a very sort of maybe naive way, was to ask architects, why aren't you dealing with these subjects? And we know that there are practices that are dealing with these subjects. And we actually tried to pick a mix of people, some who are and some who aren't. But actually, if you look at our results, they're all sort of quite shy. Of course, one could say that you are... a lot of the people's work here today is trying to realize a number of these ideas at a local level. And the question is, can I was discussing earlier with Michael from Amsterdam. The question, are these strategies scalable? Can we discuss city planning in the same form as you approach the particular challenges that you address? Because of course, we're in most of the projects here, we were discussing very local issues, and mostly in consolidated cities that have vacant spaces, particularly in your case, that can be readdressed. But how do we translate this type of attitude towards not necessarily the creation of a new formal utopia, but can we scale it to think about how cities should function?
There are two aspects in your comment and question that I think first, the utopia. I really think that the modernity has gotten us where we are right now. And I think that the criticism of modernity is, in the great extent, totally justified. Economic disasters, social pathologies, all these that resulted as a product of this so-called instrumental rationality, in Adorno's word. It's something that was really the blueprint or the plan, and our own belief in the blueprint and the plan as the final goal is really the topic where we should, from which we as architects or urban planners should criticize modernity. But on the other hand, I really think that, first of all, we can't go back. Second of all, I think that, whatever you like to call, I'll tell to people in Zagreb, all the schools, universities, hospitals, theaters, museums that you go in are actually built during the modernity. You people 60 years ago were completely illiterate. Modernity, not to mention science, modernity is good. I don't have any doubt with that. So I I mean, coming from Zagreb and from, let's say, post-socialist context, I don't like that this post-socialist context to be exaggerated too much, because I always have this sense of naivety and nostalgia towards socialism, which is also it's a bit disempowering. On the other hand, I don't like the cynicism and irony and mourning of postmoderns. That modernism failed, and we don't have the future project right now. Utopia is gone. We don't have the next utopia. So I think that we should continue modernity, but in a different kind of modernity. And this is why my title is The Non-Modern Zagreb, which was, I'm using this, I took the term non-modern from Latour's beautiful essay that maybe we have never been modern, I mean, where he really does a quite beautiful anthropological study about modernity that I think every architect should read, because I think it's a very, very precise and very fresh look upon modernity. But to come back to the second aspect of your question, can we put up the scale, and can we use this approach on a higher scale? 4 or 5 years ago, a philosopher friend of mine from Slovenia, he was spending his master in Van Eyck, and he organized a symposium on self-governing city. Using a city, how cities were governed in ex-Yugoslavia, which I have to admit, some models of city governance in Yugoslavia were quite innovative, and by no means, we could use them maybe as an inspiration, not anymore as any kind of model, but but in 2 days we were talking about this, how can we put up the scale? I mean, no conclusions. But I definitely think that the reason why modernity, in a sense, the way it developed, why it stopped, is because of this intransparent machinery that is behind it. You can't see the reason. You can't see what it is for. Not only because citizens are greatly disenfranchised, not because political representative democracy is not functioning anymore. Not only by this, but I think that we lost the language. There are too much of terms, there are too much of translations that we use, and we are talking about the reality of the city, and at the end of the day, we are completely missing it, So I think that is the problem. Building a new response or new notion of the city, together with nature, together with all these agencies, protocols. I think we should really rethink the city. I think this could bring us into on the next level of how the city could be governed. But I definitely think that we should continue with modernization. We should continue with utopia, in a sense.
What should be the role of public space in rethinking the city? Particularly if you...
I don't know. I mean, in political terms or economics and stuff like that, I don't know, because I'm not an economical scientist or political scientist. But as for an architect, I think that the role of public space is exactly in this absence that enables novelty all the time. Public space reinvents the city all the time. This is the reason of why we need it. Why the city cannot exist without the public space. I mean, but when you ask public space, you probably don't mean only the squares and the you probably mean all this that is white on the wrong map, you know, all that is all the tissue, you know. This is the.
Okay, thanks. Any questions or from the public, maybe?
Thank you. I see a contradiction here, very interesting, because you are defending the idea that public space is the absence of political power, and all the projects that you show uses public space as the space of political power, understanding political as the participation of the city who has a citizen that has a political voice, not the power of politicians. So can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Let me clarify. I was not thinking about political power of. I was thinking about the political power. I was thinking about, you know, the controlling, the above political power, this kind of political power. Because I agree totally that public space is the space of antagonism, where political power is articulated. So in this, I don't have the. I'm not in this way. I'm not in the contradiction. I totally agree. Even though it's funny for me to see how I think it's very in a way interesting how, for example, Anna showed us projects of art in public space that reminds me almost, you know, as you know, you today when you say somebody that you are writing for the newspaper, they tell you, oh, I mean, newspaper, it's an old media, you know. You should write a blog, you should write on the portals, you know, because the newspaper as media is dead. I mean, if newspaper is dead as media, how dead is the public space as media, you know? On one hand, you know, but on the other hand, we see that public space is, if you put something in the public space, it could really, I mean, it's like a bomb. Even, you know, the most benevolent, you know, message.
Any other question? So what do you think is going to be the major task in the future? Should we just be happy or pleased enough, or focus on maintaining public space? Should simply be pleased with its mere existence, or is there something else? Is that going to be the main focus, or just the fight to keep it, to keep it alive?
I mean, I think there are many. The development of modernity, like you say, actually also is constantly bringing new functions to public space, or new forms of, new ways of experiencing it and of using it. I mean, what's interesting about most of these cities that we've shown, actually, particularly the European cities, they were designed to actually constrain protest. No? I mean, most cities are, so to speak, parliaments are usually in not very accessible parts of the city, and people have developed tools like we see in the Madrid type of protests, and also what happened in Istanbul, to circumvent these rules. I see, I mean, my main question about the utopia also has to do with how this development will happen, because as a student, I always expected, you know, you sort of look into history and there's modernism, and then there's postmodernism, and then there's nothing else, as in, like, particularly in urban design, no? In the way cities are structured. And so I've always been wondering if, why can there be a new utopia, and perhaps the one you're describing just does not have a formal representation, which of course it's difficult to visualize. But I agree that, I mean, I'm quite hopeful, particularly, I mean, I think today I've heard so many interesting people talking. I would, as a kind of bit of an outsider, what I keep asking, and this is why I was asking about the scalability of some of these options. I still have, I'm yet to see some of these strategies applied, not, of course, not, I'm not talking scale as in just size, but like you said, can we develop systems of governance that are more intimately linked to some of these participatory ideas that we've been discussing?
In 2005, so actually at the peak of property bubble and financial investments in Zagreb there was something like 500,000 square meters of new office space built. In the same time, 20 square meters of schools was built. I mean, so basically the schools were only repaired, and maybe one more classrooms or whatever. But I mean, the public infrastructure. I don't have to mention you how much it was invested into new public space, or into the, repairment, the pavement and stuff into the existing public space. You can imagine that by now the situation could only have gone worse, and the lack of funds and stuff like that. So I think, in terms of the figures, the statistics, the situation is pretty pessimistic. On the other hand, I think that through different kinds of approaches, do-it-yourself methods, funny ways of combining work with leisure, free time, different kinds of social phenomena and shifts are obviously giving birth or leaving their marks in public space in Croatia and around the world, definitely. I mean, Latin America is crazier than ever, in that sense. So in that sense, I'm totally optimistic, or at least, your question actually provoked me to make me think about Antonio Gramsci when he said that we are living in the time of mutants, where the old is not able to die and the new is not able to be born. So we are living in this kind of painful interregnum, where we don't know what's going to happen. And we are all so eager to find out, but we are stuck in this, So, I mean, this is, I think this is the situation that we are right now, and probably it's the situation of modernity, because modernity is always like, waiting for the old to die, because the old has to die before the new one is born. But coming back to my definition of the modernity, I think that we have to learn to think or not to expect for the old to die anymore. I think the whole concept of time is changing, The time has stopped being linear, Time is circular, going in spirals, overlapping. I think this is, we have to open our eyes only for this kind of, seeing the reality. And I think this might be really, really refreshing, because in this type of linear time in our mind, still being totally modern, as we all went to school in the 80s. I mean, we can't be nothing else than modern. I mean, we are totally, used to be modern. We want revolution. We want big changes. We think in cuts. Big changes. And but because of this, we are very, very unhappy.
Okay, I think that makes a fine conclusion for today, but only Axel has another question or comment.
You were asking if it's scalable, huh? Like projects like this, certainly they're scalable, and there's also examples of that. It's just dependent on people in power in certain, on the different scales. So there is mayors in Holland, for instance, who follow totally different approaches in city development, city planning. There's examples in whatever, Medellin, if you look at what's happened there in the last 10 years. So it is transferable to different scales. It depends on the people who get in power in the city planning departments, mayors, also the pressure of other, how good architects, urban planners can convince people from their concepts. So it's a question of time and generations also. Is that what you meant with Scalable or not?
When I said scalable, I mean, I know some of these things you're referring to. It's more, I wasn't referring scalable in terms of size, as in like, I mean, of course, some of these projects you could say they could be multiplied, or the question was more like how would, I mean, if you were to address, as we speak, the same modernity or the same utopias that you were talking about are being built all over Asia. No? There's sort of gigantic cities being built based on the same ideas that ours were. No? And of course, I cannot challenge you and say, what would you do if? How would you apply your ethics or your ideas about architecture on that scale? So it's not so much about scale, but the question is like, can we develop from this basis? Is it possible to develop a way of thinking design that is applicable to challenges that are not the ones we've been mostly debating here, which were small-scale interventions in the center of consolidated cities, but more in terms of, because what we see is very much the opposite. I mean, at that scale, let's say, yes, there are some interesting exceptions, but there's also the fact that, say, London Olympics is a whole city that is private. It's completely private. There's no public space. The same for a number of, most of the last developments in Europe are based already on the idea that space is concessioned, that investment is made by private individuals, that governments pay for the use. There are many cities that have areas where the rules of the use of public space are different because these spaces are privatized. And so in that sense, let's say the common practice is not, yes, with a few exceptions, but so my question was more in the direction of this utopia, like how could we project a new utopia? And I think so I agree with you, I understand that of course the attitude is scalable. I just haven't seen, like for instance today here there wasn't one person talking on that level of on that scale, say. Not to say that it doesn't exist, but I was curious. It was.
Just in terms of what you're saying about, I mean, power comes up a lot, and earlier there was a discussion about how the economic system can be kind of subverted, which you were talking about, rather than just shouting about taking it down. And there is one quite easy way in Western society that you can take power, and that is to get elected. And increasingly, what I'm looking at with the groups that I work with in Glasgow, where I've created community organisations with the aim of physical regeneration, which maybe now have 600, 700 community members. What I've realised is to become a local councillor in that area, you maybe only need 500 votes. So there's no reason why the organisation that we've created can't put a candidate at the next council elections and actually start to take and have influence within the structures of power that exist. Because really it's the structures that aren't necessarily the problem, it's the people within them and the vested interests that keep them there. But if every community organisation in Glasgow that has over 500, 600 local members put up one candidate, then maybe actually we could take the council. And it seems to me that a lot of the time there's so much effort in trying to take down these structures that people forget actually how easy it is to get into them. And they forget that because all the people who are in them are trying to, put up these layers that were spoken about before about, oh, it's too difficult, you can't do it, you can't be it. But all you need is a few hundred friends I've got them on Facebook, you know. So it's not that hard, you know. But it seems to be.
When you have power, you then also get corrupted.
Well, that's true, and
I think people doesn't see it as a way because they are protesting against this political way of doing things.
But I think often
yes, it's true what you are saying,
yeah,
but I think this is the
I think
reason.
it's not the system; it's the people,
Yes.
and people want to blame tools and they want to blame structures without maybe looking at human nature and behaviour as the issue.
No, I think you're totally right. In one thing, I think it's also one of the things that we inherited through modernity is this in a way totally ununderstandable situation where we people that are not in politics, we tend to think politics as something outside us, something that is totally unreachable to us, something that is total, some kind of dishonest activity, which it surely is, because you do get corrupted through all these protocols and translations, you know, because you actually you don't represent those that voted for you, but actually you speak for, in 2 or 3 years you start speaking for yourself, you know. Okay, we know how it goes. But I think also, I think really one of the problems is that people think about politics, about institutions, you know, about all this catalog of mechanisms, of robots, of beasts, of modernity as something outside them, you know, because they're outside us. They are not reachable to us. They are against us. We are against them. We should, you know, we should protest. We should, you know, we should cut their throats, you know. While on the other hand, the opposite is the truth. They are the product of us, you know. I mean, I don't know if, you see that all these for 40 years now, and it still goes on, that this strong institutional critique is something that is very, very, you know, good way of expressing the discontents of modernity, you know. The institutions, the disillusion of the institutions, the institutional incapacity, and so on and so forth. Institutions are to blame for everything, but institutions are the product of us. We produce the institutions, so we can change them as well. Institutions, I mean, this is the way I think about institutions. I think it would be totally irresponsible, stupid, expensive to abolish institutions as we see them right now.
I agree, yes.
You know, because we have invested in them.
But there is one more actor that you are forgetting, that it's economical power, because politicians now, all the laws, all the political decisions are dictated not by politicians, by the FMI, by the World Bank. So it's not only a political problem. We have to operate one level more and try to go against this other, because politicians again are puppets in the hands of economical power. So I think this is the layer we need to, and I agree with you in that sense that if we accept that we can get involved in politics, is the only way to reach that level. But
I'm not sure that we all have to become political subjects. I'm not sure that we have to run for mayors to be able to change our cities. Well, I myself personally, I don't want to get involved in politics. I don't have any interest in that. You know. Okay, But what I'm trying to say, that maybe the political subjectivity as we know it is also shifting. You know. Because right now in Croatia, which is very, very young democracy, we are politically, we are totally literate country. You know, we don't know shit about anything in politics because we had one party for 50 years. I think even in Croatia, very interesting things are happening on the local level of politics. You know, this kind of funny species. You know, people that got into politics because agendas not to change the world or not to run high up to the president, but to do something good for the local, or to represent their cultural identity, or groups. I think this is. I'm not a political scientist, but the little I know, I really think that in this field also tremendous and interesting things are happening. And this is why whenever we done our projects, and I saw that you in Berlin also did that, because it's the most obvious thing to do is the mapping of the actors. Who is interested? Who are the stakeholders? Who is paying for this? Because who is who? This is the essence, for an architect, because architect is looking for the commissioner in a sense, Architect is not sitting in his office and wait for somebody to knock, and then he's up there in the open field looking for the actors. Because architecture is actually that. The organization, the spatial organization of the social and material capital. This is what architecture is. You can't sit in your office to...
Okay, I'm sure this discussion will continue tomorrow, and maybe even now in the courtyard a little bit more. Thank you for staying with us until the end, and you're of course all invited to come back tomorrow morning